and I'm going to turn it over to Eric. And Eric, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mallory. Good evening, everyone. Like an in-person kind of guy, so like I just want to say, hey, how's everyone doing, and have that kind of rebuttal of, oh, everyone's good. Whenever I hear someone intro me, I'm always like a little awkward. I don't know why that is. I've been around addiction for a long time, the field, and I've also personally and professionally. And being on this webinar, thank you, Mallory, for hosting and being a resource and availability to families and individuals. Because when I was doing direct, I still do some direct service, but when I was doing direct service in the Caron Warnersville residential facility, one of my favorite parts was working with couples, working with families, and really being able to bridge and bring people back together. I always thought that, this notion of hope and this notion of, the change or the turnover, and things can be different. And the ability to just give that little shred when it seems like sometimes such a dark time, that there's light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you for having me on here, and thanks everyone for coming on today. I'm going to share my screen. And there we go. And excuse me, I'm fighting a little bit of a cold. So like I'm just gonna be popping Halls the entire time, and drinking water the entire time. But that's just to keep myself a little hydrated, as I will, if I don't, I will cough throughout this entire presentation. I was presenting for a certification board on Tuesday, and I went into like a coughing spree kind of right in the middle of it, and had to take 4 minutes. So feel a little bit better today than I did then. So my hope is that that will not happen tonight. This is one of my favorite quotes. So Dr. Brene Brown, if anyone wants to like read like an amazing doctor who really studies motivation and leadership, and shame and vulnerability and love and the ability to kind of move through and feel emotions. She has tons of books. One of them is The Gifts of Imperfection, which this quote is from. But there's also lots of different TED Talks and podcasts. I saw her speak in DC. She is inspirational, and the ability to just listen to her and gain knowledge from her has given me so much as a practitioner to help families and help individuals. So I just wanted to read this from her book, from The Gifts of Imperfection, on hope. Hope is not an emotion, it's a way of thinking or a cognitive process. Emotions play a supportive role, but hope is really a thought process, which Snyder calls a trilogy of goals, pathways, and agency. Very simple terms, hope happens when we have the ability to set realistic goals. I know where I want to go, the ability and able to figure out how to achieve those goals, including the ability to stay flexible and to develop alternative routes. I know how to get there, persistence, tolerate disappointment, and try again. We believe in ourselves. I can do this. So, breaking that down, there's three things that she really emphasized here is really about the journey. And like, we're all on a journey. And sometimes it looks like this wonderful picture that is, I can't see the chat, so maybe Mallory, if something jumps in, let me know. Sometimes it's a wonderful picture, and if you're scared of heights, this picture probably you're like, wow, that is not the picture for me. But for me, when I saw the picture, I was like, this is a beautiful journey. Let me walk this journey. If anyone's walking this journey, my bags are packed. I'll go with you. It is just, that would be serene to me. That would be a serene place to me. And that journey is bridged with a goal or a destination or somewhere that I want to get to. The interesting thing with journeys is oftentimes we don't necessarily get where we thought we were going to go. And sometimes the journey doesn't necessarily look like the road that sits in front of me. And I have to be able to develop and create flexibility to achieve where I want to go, even though at the end of it, I might not necessarily get where I thought I wanted to go, but oftentimes it's even a better place. And I always have to believe in myself. Always, always, always. And some of that is just really just creating the notion of gratitude in my life and recognizing that I can do this and I'm grateful for things and we can do this together. Oftentimes, sometimes the journey kind of looks like this. Um, you might be living in Alaska and you might be like, wow, this is like serene to me. Like no one's there. For me, my knee-jerk reaction is there's only one person there. If I'm driving on this, I'm slipping off this road and it doesn't look like there's any help anywhere. So when I look at this, I think of, okay, this is not necessarily the journey that I want to be on, but this is sometimes the reality of the course that we take, and sometimes it will turn into something that we actually didn't recognize. So to share a little bit about myself and kind of my background, and Mallory introduced me as a professional that's treating those individuals in recovery, or entering a lifestyle of recovery, and families entering recovery themselves. I'm an individual in recovery as well. And when I was thinking, and Mallory talked me into being on here tonight, my mom had said, your nephew's birthday is a couple of weeks away. I said, oh, okay. I said, how old is he turning? And I go, I should know this. When I was in treatment, it was the second time that I was in treatment. My nephew was born 3 weeks after I entered treatment. So I entered treatment September 5th, 13 years ago. I celebrated 13 years on September 5th. Just this last, well, coming, yeah, like right now. And when I think about like families and where I am today versus where I was when I entered recovery, it's such a different place. It almost feels a lifetime ago. When I entered the second treatment, I was coming off of incarceration, which I never thought I would be in or dealing with, because I didn't have necessarily the what I believed was the family or the resources. I always thought that I had the family or the resources to bail me out. So I never thought I'd be in that situation, which I was. I never thought that I would be in a position where I had absolutely no out and I was scared. And the thing is that I didn't necessarily ever think that I would end up there. But the reality is when you're on this road as the individual that's suffering from the disease of addiction, let it left unchecked long enough, that tends to be where we end up: jails, institutions, and death. So for me, jails and institutions, thankfully the third never happened. And again, I didn't recognize that that's necessarily where I was going to be. And when I entered that space, I was really, really, really scared. When I entered treatment for the second time, I recognized that it was going to be a very long process. I was really scared about the situation that I was in, but I was also very fearful about how far I got sober at 24, how far my peers had developed in their lives and how stunted I was in my own. So I knew I had a lot of gains to make and a lot of growth to make. Fast forward to 24, well, 24, I get sober, and fast forward to now, recovery, the journey, 12 steps, treatment, therapy, going back to school, going back for my master's, meeting my wife, having a child, buying a home. All these things were completely not even in the realm of possibilities for me when I was 24. When I was 24, my mom was in her mind, she was becoming ready to bury her son. That's where she was. So for me, I was okay with that. So to fast forward to where I am today, looking back 13 years prior, it does feel like a completely different lifetime ago. And it wasn't that long ago. So I wanted to start off with sharing kind of like the reason why I'm so hopeful. I was sitting with someone and I was getting someone into treatment. He was coming up from Virginia and he was intoxicated, and we were sitting in the detox. If anyone has ever dropped anyone off of the detox in Caron, Pennsylvania, I was sitting in the detox, and he came in via car, and he's intoxicated, um, obviously intoxicated. And he said, "Why are you here? Why are you here? What are you doing? Why are you showing up? What does this do?" It's 8 o'clock at night. I just drove in, just put my daughter to bed, and drove up to Caron, Warnersville, which isn't terribly far, but 30 minutes from me. And I talked to him a little bit, gave him an answer. I don't know if it was a great answer. I saw him 3 weeks later, and I met with him prior to him discharging. And I said, the answer to your question is, if something happened to me today, and you have a child and you have a family at home, I would want someone to show up for me. That would mean the world to me. So the reason why I'm showing up and the reason why I believe that you can do this time is because you have it in you, and you have a family, and you have a lot of motivation today than where you were when I saw you 5 years ago. So that brings me a lot of hope. Seeing people in recovery, seeing people sustaining recovery. I have people working from Caron for Caron that I used to treat. I have people that like regain their families, that build new lives, and I get to see this and walk this journey and just experience it with them. It's transformational. It's really quite an amazing process to see. So that's my daughter and my wife right there. My father-in-law is blurred out in the background. Probably a good thing you can't see him. I don't know if he'd really want to be in that picture. And then me on the backside of it. But you talk about like why do you wake up? Why do you do what you do? Why do you continue to push yourself? I mean, family is one of those things. We all need support system, all of us. Family, friends, therapists, everyone contributes to like your recovery journey. It helps kind of foster that hope. It really helps drive someone to make changes in their life. When I think about like working with individuals and families, like why people get into treatment or why people want to stay in recovery, a lot of it's around families, moms, dads, kids, brothers, sisters, and really wanting to be a part of and feeling very disconnected from, because the disease of addiction is about disconnection. So when people start to come out of the blackness, come out of the fog of addiction, the support systems that are around them are really what they're leaning into. What I'd love to ask from all of you guys, not that I can see the chat, maybe just think about this. Everyone needs someone in their life to be able to like be completely vulnerable and transparent to. Like everyone needs that one person. For everyone on this call, I would love for you to just think about like who that one person is for you. Sister, mom, therapist, whoever that is for you. And keep that person really, really, really close to you, because life happens, and that person is always going to be the person that's going to be kind of in your corner and able to bounce that, for you to be able to be very like authentic with, and they can be very authentic with you. And if you don't have a person like that, and I think of like my dad and other people that have like went through a recovery process with an individual as a family of an individual, and wasn't really like willing to kind of jump both feet in. Think about like the power that having someone in your life like that would be. Someone that you didn't have to hold everything to you and kind of just muscle through, that you could give a little bit of it away, to lighten your burden a little bit, to lighten your potential like fears or anxieties or whatever that might be. Lots of different support systems out there. A couple, as I said, friends, families, professional help, online resources like Mallory just gave you, therapists, support groups, 12-step recovery, other gyms, spiritual institutions. There's so many different ways that we can kind of, wrap ourselves in a supportive system. As a therapist, for me, it's seeing seeing people walk into my office or meeting with people, just allowing them to be them without any filters, without any hats, without any roles, without any labels, not feeling fearful or that someone's going to judge them or that they have to, like just being able to just be themselves with all the imperfections, is probably one of the greatest gifts that I have in my life, because I'm able to just be there and be a sounding board for that, and just being able to walk with someone hand in hand through a process. And that's usually a process of change in some way. Usually someone seeks a therapist, something's going on that they want change to happen, either for themselves or other people. One of the greatest gifts that I had in my life. I never thought I'd be a therapist. I always thought I'd be in finance or business or a doctor or a lawyer, because that's kind of everyone else in my family system. But such is life. Like, it has given me the opportunity to be involved in a very different way. And speaking of change, because that's fundamentally what certainly I do on a day-to-day basis. And when we talk about recovery, recovery is all about change. Change is a fundamental principle of recovery. Oftentimes, what we think is that change happens. What we don't recognize is, and sometimes when I'm meeting with individuals, is change happens over time, and change can happen quickly, and change can happen over a long period of time. And for us, I should say, speak for myself. For me, I want things now. And I always kind of joke that it's still the addict in me, that like I want what I want and I want it right now. But I think that's probably fair to say that if you want things to happen, you want them to happen. And recovery usually doesn't happen like that. Usually we have that pretty profound change at times where you're like, wow, they really got it, or they're really coming a long way, or they're really engaging, or they really seem happy. And sometimes it's like, wow, I feel like we just went 100 steps back. And that's okay too, because it's a journey and it's a process, and everyone's journey and process happens. And then whether that's with individuals or with families, families travel the same path, exactly the same path, as those that are in recovery, that might have had a substance use disorder, or had a problem that they're recovering from. They make strides forward, we make strides back. And again, that's okay. That's our individual journey. Have your experience and have your journey. There's no right or wrong in that. It's all a process. It's all over time. Oftentimes, the belief that I believe, that's a fundamental recovery statement. When you walk into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, Nar-Anon, Al-Anon, when you walk into support groups of any kind, religious, anything, really what we're looking for is kind of that common experience, the shared hope, the belief that someone else has overcome, the belief that someone else has walked the same path that I've walked and have came on the other side of it. And oftentimes, when someone's struggling in that moment and like I can't do this, I can't do it, like I know you can. And if you can't believe that you can in this moment, believe that I believe you can. And how many times I've said that to people that are in that moment of weakness, because we all have that moment of weakness and that moment where we start to question ourselves of, are we doing are we doing the right thing? Are we doing what we need to do? Can we do this? And being able to have someone next to you to be able to share that experience, share that common goals, to walk that with you, to walk the journey, is so profoundly important. Addiction needs secrecy and silence. Addiction fosters off secrecy and silence. So the one thing that you can do if you're walking out of addiction and into the light of recovery, or you're walking on this road of recovery, is to not keep secrets and keep talking. Keep talking, keep sharing, keep expressing yourself, and just keep walking your truth in your line moving forward. Because the way to move back is to close up, stop talking, buckle down, but button down, isolate yourself, go into the darks. That's the way that we start to regress and move backwards. And I love this quote. It's not, I shouldn't say quote. It's a phrase from that Brene Brown said, and I kind of quote it as, "Shame and guilt exposed to light cannot live." And like, so true. And this is the healing process. This is the healing process for families. This is the healing process for individuals, and systems. Need to expose it. Bring that about. Bring the change. Bring it to light. And the amazing thing about all of this journey is how far we've come. What we do today and where we were when I started in this field, 12 years ago, we didn't ever talk about traumas. We never talked about, mental health. We never talked about, I was 20, the first time I entered treatment, I was 23. Caron, Pennsylvania was the first and only treatment. Well, there was the only treatment center at that time to treat specialized young adults. There was no other treatment center in the country that treated young adults ages 18 to 25. And I would pose the question of, like, why do you think that is? I'll give you the answer today. They're untreatable. There's an untreatable population that's a revolving door. Their social environments, their friend groups, the school systems, their invincibility, the ability that their brain isn't fully developed, the risk-taking behaviors. They're an untreatable population, and I was part of that group. And I just happened to end up in a situation where I was in a facility that said that's not true, and we don't believe that, and we're not just gonna toe the line. And these individuals need help too. When I was there during treatment, Hazelden and Betty Ford actually came and toured that program to model their program off of ours, specifically for the young adult population. And I think that a big testament to my recovery was to be in that program, and for someone to believe in me when there wasn't a lot of belief in myself, but there even wasn't a lot of belief outside of myself at that time in treatment. Again, we've come a long way. What we know now and what we knew then were very, very, very different. Back then, we thought that treating addiction was an isolated kind of, you treat it in a vacuum. You treat addiction and then you treat everything else. What we know today is that doesn't work. So now we treat teens and young adults and adolescents, and this notion of, like, people will just come in and out of treatment, and that's just the nature of the illness, has been proven absolutely incorrect and wrong, and further perpetuates the stigma around addiction. We specialize care. We bring self-help as a notion of change, as a conjunctive factor into treatment of other disorders and conditions. We look at the brain, which is the actual issue that is happening for the individual. It's why why we're overtaken, and why it seems seemingly insane, the actions that individuals take in active addiction, because the brain is impacted so much. And we recognize that lifetime success rates for people that enter any form of treatment at any point in their life, if they do that within their lifetime, is 75%. That's an astonishing success rate. And people need to continuously press, and I will say it over and over again, and any opportunity that I get, that treatment works. It's highly successful. Due to the illness, it can be challenging at times, but we need to get people into treatment. We need to get families in treatment. We need to get the connection happening. We need to expose the addiction to light, and we really need to move forward as a joint unit. That's how you treat addiction, and that's how the success rates are so high. So again, when I started out, it was just like, oh, the person next to you on both sides, and you, one of you, two of you aren't going to make it. So out of you three, one person's going to get it. It's not true. And again, it's not helpful for individuals, family members or otherwise, to believe that. I want to instill hope. I want to drive change. I don't want to sit in the darks and the shadows of what had been 10, 15 years ago. So how do we look forward? This is all about beginnings and opportunity. If I always say, for individuals I'm working with, like opportunities, you're going to hear me say that word over and over and over again. And by the end of the time that we see each other, you're going to be like, you can take your opportunities and stick them in a bag. And because I say it all the time, because I really do, I believe it. I really, really, truly believe it. Some of the best opportunities that I've ever gotten in my life, that I've ever seen people experience in their life, are some of the hardest moments that they could possibly ever even, they didn't even fathom that they could possibly have the hardship that they've had. And they've overcame, and they've grown and been so much more, in so much of a different place, that they would have never believed that they would have gotten there in their life. I think of my recovery as a blessing. I think of the hardship that I went through as a blessing. You never be the person that you are today without what you've experienced in your life, for good and bad, for healthy and unhealthy. So again, I enter any situation as an opportunity. And some people, might they want to throw me out of the room, session 10, because they're thinking, man, if this guy thinks another thing's an opportunity, I don't know. Looking for a belief that we do have a better life in front of us. The reconnections and bringing families back together is so critical. Reconnecting with self. Wow. Like, I'm going to expand a little bit out on the next slide, but the ability to really truly look internally of where you are and what can be, or where you want to go. Recovery is really an opportunity to do that. It's an opportunity to take a step back. It's an amazing opportunity. It's an amazing process. Spirituality, or that interconnected experience, an ability to when I'm doing deep therapeutic work with individuals, oftentimes we're operating, even as adults, as a response to things that happened 30, 40, 50 years ago. And the ability to uncover what sometimes is driving how we react, how we respond to anxiety or fear, is the ability to not let those things control our lives anymore. When I think of someone that I think of an example of a spouse, and they're full of anxiety because every single time a refrigerator opens, they think their husband's getting a beer out of the refrigerator. He's in recovery now, so that's not happening. But her anxiety and her fear response rate, to the point where at one point her guard was down so much that she jumped out of her chair when he opened up the refrigerator. This is the notion of traumas and fears that are instilled in us through hardship and trauma that we go through. And we have to come out the other side. And how we do that is we start to develop and learn a different way. And that's all about building that resiliency, the ability to adapt and overcome and bounce back from, is kind of the defining factor of resiliency. So what we view and how we see addiction and recovery has changed. We've developed so much over time, and outcomes have changed, and it's really an amazing thing. And one of the things that I really wanted to highlight today, especially when you start to about hope and recovery, is addiction is really an illness that is no different than any other illness that's out there, whether that's congestive heart failures, excuse me, um, diabetes, other chronic health conditions. Recovery rates are attached and almost identical to those other conditions or those other medical conditions. So like everyone else that's recovering from health, mental health conditions, physical health conditions, addiction is the same, and that recovery process and the statistics are very much aligned with all of those things. So not to get into like the weeds of the brain, but I kind of said it a little bit early on the front side of this is addiction's a little bit different in the sense of you're dealing with an organ that's impacted. The organ isn't like the liver or the kidneys or like it's not something that we know that much or we can, hey, we can do this medication, we can increase the sugar. Like there's like kind of the tug and go of it. The brain's just different. The brain is just way more complex. And the notion that someone has a an illness like that's very specific to addiction or addictions to, and I'm talking about behavioral health addictions. I'm talking about alcohol or marijuana or cannabis or gambling or anything, exercise. I mean, there's so many different versions of what behavioral health addiction, behavioral health, compulsive behaviors. Basically, the notion is the brain's hijacked. So when you start to, as a family member, or even as the individual that's suffering, try to stop or interject into that process, the brain ultimately's response system is goes into flight and fight or flight or survival mode. So it's either going to run or it's going to fight you because it just wants to survive. And walking in, and that's like one of the first things that I would say to family members or spouses or individuals that are dealing with this is that it's not the individual that's at late stage addiction or progressive when addiction progresses to the point where it has now become a biological process and that switch has changed. The individual isn't the individual anymore, which is just sad to say in that moment, but it's true. And we need to recognize that, understand the damage and the effects, and go, okay, let's move this person towards change. Let's get this person sober. And then we'll see the real person come back. Because then what you see is you hear they look healthy again. They're saying they're there. They don't look dead in the eyes anymore. They feel good. They sound good. I feel like I got my loved one back again. We start to hear this language again because that person was really gone. That person was really taken from that into the family or the spouse or the individual. So that person coming back is just an amazing thing, and it affects it affects that limbic system. The limbic system is a primary feature. So like when you think of like, well, why would a mother leave her child to go and drink or go and score or do something like that unattended? Like, doesn't that mother love the child? No, she does. It's not about that. At that point in time, it has nothing to do with love or affection or safety of another person. It's all about getting the survival feature satisfied, and then the next thing will come. So it's a really profound impact in a very primal feature in the brain. And this creates the denial, the justifiables, the adaptation, the behaviorism, the coping, the management styles that individuals have with that. I'll pop it and take a drink because it'll help you guys digest, and it'll also help me be able to speak for longer. I'm really into brain science, by the way. I think it's like the coolest thing in the world. brain science is like one of those amazing things. It's like the ocean in my perspective. Like it's like the vast unknown that's untapped. It's one of the areas that we just don't know everything about. And it's actually fairly the science is developing very rapidly in comparison to other areas of science. So for this, plasticity is very cool. Basically, it just says the brain changes. So I'm a trauma therapist as well, so I'm going to take a back step on this a little bit. So what we thought is we thought that in for our brains were it's electrical and it changes over time. So we thought, okay, so if you put substances in the body or if you have traumatic experiences, your brain would rewire itself. And that's all we kind of knew. We go, okay, it would rewire itself in certain regions. What we know today is impacts on the brain affect every region of the brain in nuanced ways. And it's not just one area. The other thing that we've recognized is that that brain structures can actually change size if they're impacted in certain aspects, environmental impacts. So when you start to think about, okay, the way someone's raised, things that have happened to them, traumas, addiction, whatever that is, it actually has physical and biological change and impact into the brain system itself. The flip side of that, which I think is even, and we're not here yet, but I think that we will be at some point, in reverse order, the same is true. Recovery is a process, it's an environmental change, it's an adaptation that also has profound effects on the brain. Healing has profound effect on the brain. Therapies have profound effects on the brain and rewiring. So we can look at this as like, okay, negatives can have really negative consequences, but on the flip side of this, positives can have absolutely amazing consequences. So when we look at hope, and the side of hope in this is that change happens, it works, treatment works, your brain changes, your brain rewires itself, and then ultimately you pass those adaptations and that growth and the strength onto further generations. How wonderful is that? Like how much hope can you give me? Okay, like through my hardship, I can do more for my daughter. I can pass better genes and better her literally the physical nature of her brain can adapt and build better. Like amazing. Like thankfully I went through what I went through, and then I can actually do more. So great, some of the wonderful science that's coming out and the ability to kind of really frame ourselves in some wonderful hope moving forward. Setting and achieving goals, breaking down that big picture, SMART goals, always love to kind of like look at like what can I do. Sometimes people want to like achieve, like I want to hit this benchmark. Like I want to be a year sober. I want to be 10 years sober. I want to lose 100 pounds. I want to wake up happy every day. I want $1 million. I want to save $1 million. I want whatever that, like these very, very lofty goals. Being able to kind of break down the process and focus on the process and recognize like we want those incremental goals, that like that achievement or that validation that we're actually like hitting markers, is hugely important. That's why we have chips. That's why we recognize things in recovery. It's to give us motivation to continue to validate that process, to validate the growth, to validate where you are in your journey. Hugely important in any aspect of your life, and not necessarily like recovery is a process. It's about wellness, it's about health, it's about physical health, it's about exercise, it's about learning. It's a process that has a lot of things that are certainly associated with individuals that may be families and individuals that are recovering from an individual that was impacted from substance use, but it has so many different facets. It's a much bigger picture than that. As I said, celebrate reward yourself, share your success, reflect on progress, new goals, milestones, self-care. And I just want to say, like, we tend to spend, I hear a lot of people spending a lot of time um, not doing this, not rewarding yourself, not going out, like just feeling like there was too much. I'll just share this briefly. My wife and me are celebrating 8 years, so we're dropping my daughter off with my mom, and we're going on a weekend kind of just getaway for ourselves. And it seems silly to me, like as much as I know, and as much as that I think that I work on myself and I work with other people that do this, that work on themselves, that I shouldn't feel guilty for doing, or I shouldn't feel like I shouldn't not leave my daughter, or I have that responsibility, or why should I not do that, or I should be working, or I should have picked up this event that was happening this week and I said no to. Like, look, reward yourself, go places, share your successes, recognize some of the foundations of like your life and marriages and all those wonderful things and achievements. 8 years, 13 years, like those things are hugely important. It really gives you motivation to continue, the ability to change and continue to hit those milestones and really to drive forward. um, and sometimes the ability to actually reset and go, maybe I need a new goal. Maybe I've achieved in this area of my life kind of where I was trying to get to, and maybe I need to reevaluate and set some new expectations for my net self and some new goals. I'll say this: if it's not in my schedule, I'm not doing it. So I put everything in my schedule, because it's hard for me, with being 38, 6-year old at home, wife at home, work obligations, sport obligations, foundation obligations, volunteer work. Like, I'm pulled in so many different directions, that it's easy for me to just go, I'm too busy. Like, I'm not doing it. I'm too busy. If I could say that to anything at any point in time, no, I just need to, if it's important to me, I need to recognize the important. I need to set a goal. I need to reflect on the importance of it. I need to say that this is self-care is important to me, and I need to go and I need to do it. And then I need to celebrate it afterwards. That's what I need to do for myself. And oftentimes for that self-talk mantra of taking a step back and just talking to myself and talking myself through that is very important, at least in my process. I can say for myself in my process. What we know is what is learned can be unlearned. So if I have like unhealthy coping strategies, if I have unhealthy belief systems, how many people that I've been in a room with, that underlying feeling of not good enough, not feeling wanted enough, valued enough, loved enough, like there's that just not enough piece of things. Those learned pieces of ourselves that are oftentimes developed over time can also be unlearned, and new things can learn, and new opportunities. I bolded that word this time, just to make sure that everyone was with me. Everyone sees that big opportunities word, that we can develop and grow. We can continue to learn, continue to build, continue to explore. Same thing with addiction. Look, like, recovery is really, really, really hard early. I'll be honest with anyone about it. It can be very difficult early on. First couple years can be challenging. You're learning new things, you're growing, you're adapting, you're developing, you're building. It's all change and it's all new. If I was doing what I had done before, the results are going to be the same. So I have to do new things, and it can be very, very challenging. It can be very difficult at times. Excuse me. It is always worth it. Always worth it. So I was just saying from my experience and my experience with others and walking the road and hearing the like people, always, always, always worth it. Sometimes challenging, sometimes hard, always worth it. Talk, practice gratitude, self-care, problem solve, exercise, wellness, all that kind of builds into that ability or that meaningful coping. Ooh. Community and family, oftentimes the why, I said this at the forefront of this, oftentimes the why does someone get sober? Um, Oftentimes what I would say is like, my goal is to tap into that. Why do you want to change? What is your motivating factor? And oftentimes with recovery, it is family, it is spouses, it is kids, it might be jobs, it might be some of those different things. But to uncover the reason why you wake up, the reason why you go, the reason why you want to be in the relationship, the reason why you want to walk into the office, that in its essence will give you motivation and joy and gratitude and love for what you do day to day. So really uncovering the why, not only in life, like certainly life, but also the why you want to be sober, the why you want to walk in the recovery in the path of recovery, the why you want to be in the relationship with the person who is walking this road today. Asking yourself, probing, questioning, reflecting. Community is critical in sustaining recovery. Again, Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, community supports, spiritual institutions, religious, all of those different community assets are critical. I always say some people struggle with like 12-step recovery. Like I'm totally like, hey, your path is your path. Like everyone's path is completely different. My goal for someone that wants to move in a different direction is to find other people that also want to move in that different direction. That's my goal. So wherever you find that person, that group of people, those individuals that are like you, that are trying to achieve the same things that you're trying to achieve, stick with those people. Those are your people. Those are the people that are going to help you and motivate you along your journey. I love these questions. This we could have an hour just on this. We could just talk about these questions like back and forth, this group and me, for the next hour. When the first one of the groups that I used to run on the residential unit was a group that I named Who Am I? And it was a sheet of paper, and they had to write down a sheet of paper, and they actually had to look into a mirror and read the questionnaire back to themselves. The questionnaire is who you are, not what roles you serve. You're not a father, you're not a mother, you're not I don't want to hear that you're a teacher, or the roles that you play. Like, what makes you mad? What makes you happy? What do you have gratitude today? What do you love the most in your life? How do you want to show up for the people you care about? Like, those are like, that's who you are. Those are the sometimes the existential questions that can be shrouded by being too busy, by being in the throes of an active addiction, by being in the throes of a family system that is trying to just keep it all together, that just keep all the balls in the air. Like, we lose ourselves. Why do you want to be here? Who are you? Why are you doing what you're doing? What makes you happy? Who do you want to be? What kind of person are you? What kind of person do you want to be? How do you want to be remembered? When I treated a lot of different populations, and that question was so impactful to the older adults. I would say anyone over 55. Anyone over 55, I would say, maybe a little bit younger at times, but how do you want to be remembered? Can be hugely empowering and hugely impactful. Always practice self-compassion and forgiveness, which might be the hardest thing that we ever have to do for ourselves and others. I have a dog, if anyone didn't realize that. And he's got a big bark, but he's super nice. He's a golden doodle, and he barks one time and it's super loud. And then like he's like, if there was someone coming in my house right now to steal my TV, he would let them come in and roll on his back and like let the guy scratch his stomach and then go take the TV and walk out the front door. I won't give you my address, but that's the kind of dog he is. Anyways, as I digress, self-compassion and forgiveness, again, sometimes one of the hardest things that we can possibly, as we walk this journey of healing, to be able to do for other people around us and for ourselves. Couple of different things here to just be mindful. One of them is mindfulness, but just to be mindful on as you kind of walk your journey and you start to think about this notion of self-compassion and forgiveness. Some of it's sometimes just being realistic with yourself and just giving yourself enough space to like have your feelings and recognize your feelings, and like it not to be good, bad, or indifferent. Just it is. Feelings are messengers. They allow us to like evaluate situations and like evaluate ourselves and recognize where we are, and that's okay. But just to be mindful in this process and not be overcritical. I don't like to. I hate generalizing, but you see it so many times over and over and over. Just the internal critic that people walk around with, of just, I should have done, I could have done. It's all the shoulds, coulds, would have, and it's just it's damning to one's soul and themselves, and it really keeps you stuck. So how do we kind of recognize, and like it's okay to feel that way, and it's okay to have that language, but also just like lean into the kindness, and being able to kind of forgive yourself, and also recognize it and being able to move forward in it. All right, so we just a couple more slides. Probably some of the more important slides as we kind of round out the night tonight, at least for me talking. One of them being certainly that acknowledgement and then forgiveness. And everyone makes mistakes. We do the best we can. Situations sometimes are new, and what we can do is reflect and just be kind to ourselves. Can always strive to do better, and we have the opportunity. Someone had told me that very, very early on. Like, you sit in this pit of misery and guilt for all the damage and wreckage of the past, but you're sitting here today. So like you have the ability to rectify the past. You have the ability to show up. You have the ability to call. You have the ability to reach out. You have the ability to live your life a different way. At least for me, as the individual walking down that direct road of recovery. As families, we're in the same position. Again, reflective, it's the exact same position. We have the chance to rectify the past. We have the chance to do better. We have the chance to open ourselves up to a new way or a new possibility. We have all that. It all sits in front of us, just like the individual that is directly walking that journey as well. We walk it as well as them. And really a vision for the future. Projecting forward, what can be, what it might look like, giving ourselves some hope and some possibility. Great to maintain motivation and hope for and hope and great outlooks. I love this, be the best version of yourself. I feel like that's the only thing that we can do. It's the only thing an individual can control. Talk about you controlling your side of the street, cleaning up your side of the street. What can I do? The only thing I can do is what I can do for me and myself, how I show up. And how I want to show up today is just being the best version that I can be in that moment. And in all honesty, some days might look different than other days. Some days when I show up, the best version of myself might be here. And other days when I show up, the best version of myself might be here. And goes back to the being not too hard on ourselves, of just being like, so that self-compassion notion of just like being okay with that too. Because look, I'm sick. My daughter gets me up early. She's not doing anything that she's supposed to be doing. I'm not the best version of myself. I can recognize that. I try to take a step back. I try to breathe. She's like, he's like, daughter's like, why are you breathing? I don't want to tell her the real answer to it. This is partly the real answer to it is I need to think before I respond to you. The real answer, and will partly secondarily answer, is if I respond in this moment, it's probably going to sound fairly aggressive and like I'm yelling. So let me breathe so that I can kind of compose myself because I'm not the best. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm the best version of how I am right now with what is going on in my life. And lastly, love with your whole heart. And this is terribly, terribly difficult, as I just shared with you. Spouses, relationships, daughters, if y'all have kids, you know exactly how that is. We love them so much. And sometimes it's so difficult to really to love completely when they're might be being so hurtful or so damaging in the moment, maybe to themselves or to us or to someone else. And I know we're walking this road with individuals and families. It can be very, very difficult to walk back and open up that door of, I'm going to let you back in. I'm going to like open this door and like open my vulnerability and my heart back to you, knowing how much damage has already been done. And with that being said, I'm going to ask you to do it anyways. And that can be very, very, very difficult, depending on where you're at on this journey with an individual, how long it's been, what the consequences have been, what the damage has been. But I think that can be one of the most important things that you could possibly do to anyone that's walking this journey, or if you're walking this journey, or if you're a family walking this journey, is just to open yourself and open your whole heart up. So I think I did a good job with not coughing the entire time. And as much as I wanted to like ask some questions and some chat, I knew I was going to go basically the whole time because I timed myself before I did this. And I couldn't see the chat, so there wouldn't have been kind of an organic flow. So I really I'd love to open this up to questions. I'll shoot it over to Mallory to kind of open us back up. But thank you guys for being with me through this time.